I've long felt that one of the biggest problems with American horror movies is that they seem to feel a need to explain the threat, inadvertently making it far less scary in the process. Gaps in information are a key part in crafting a scary premise, and if done for its own sake, explaining a ghost's motivations or a serial killer's backstory can be like walking through a haunted house with all the lights turned on. The danger may still be present, but with none of the mystery and uncertainty that caused your imagination to race with speculation to begin with. But there is one slice of internet culture which seemingly inverts this rule, to surprising success. The SCP Foundation presents itself as the website for an organization that contains and studies anomalous entities. Each article focuses on a specific being or object, providing a description of their history and characteristics, as well as the results of any tests that have been conducted on them. It's essentially horror placed under a microscope, yet it often proves it can be just as scary as more conventional horror media. But what is it that makes this seemingly counterintuitive idea so effective? A disclaimer before I get going. While I've read some individual articles and played a few of the games over the years, I've never dug too deeply into SCP lore, so I'm sure I'm going to get some things wrong about the world or continuity. This video is intended as more of an examination of the concept. Conventional horror typically follows a group of characters unwittingly getting themselves into some form of threatening situation. But in a way, SCP almost feels like what happens after the horror movie, after the government has come in at the last moment to capture the monster or quarantine the cursed location. What happens to it after it's taken away? The site showcases what would otherwise be reality-bending horrors in a clinical and matter-of-fact setting, placed in a cell with the lights turned on and no place to hide, under constant surveillance and security. Not so scary anymore, right? Well, while it's true that mysteries tend to lose their appeal once they're explained, SCP has a way of getting around that. The tests that are conducted on entities often have a way of raising more questions than answers, as well as disturbing implications. It Follows is a movie about a demon that stalks its targets relentlessly, always aware of their location and walking slowly towards them. You can spend your whole life running, but sooner or later, it will catch up. Or will it? It seems to have an aversion to water, so what if you went to live on an island or a boat? Would it walk along the ocean floor? It seems to have to physically break into closed structures. So could you build something to contain it? What would it do if its target were on the ISS? Just like a horror movie, SCP articles establish an interesting set of rules and characteristics for their subjects, but provide an element of satisfaction rarely seen in traditional horror, deliberately seeking to test, thwart, break, or exploit those rules in a scientific manner. But in the process of gaining a deeper understanding of these entities, it's the new questions left unanswered that leave the biggest impression. SCP-049 takes the appearance of a plague doctor. It speaks of trying to cure what it calls the pestilence, performing horrific surgical procedures on the bodies of dead people and animals. This occasionally causes the subject to reanimate, though this does not seem to be the goal. One observation log reports, the resulting 0492 instance became animated, flailing and grasping at the walls of the chamber with a number of manufactured limbs, while moaning out of an oblong orifice now present in its sternum. Side note: there's definitely something to be said about such incomprehensible horrors, described in such an objective manner. clearly descriptive, yet somehow still leaving much to the imagination. Following a procedure, SCP-049 will either celebrate its success or lament its failure, with the conditions for either not being at all obvious to observers. It becomes agitated when pressed to explain what exactly the pestilence is, or what it considers to be a cure. It does claim to be able to detect it, sometimes claiming that various researchers are infected. Are these just insane ramblings? Or is there actually some horrible condition afflicting humanity that we're somehow unaware of? If so, what aspects of our reality is it responsible for? And are SCP-049's twisted cures actually preferable? When testing anomalous entities, some discoveries carry implications that things are far worse than what was immediately obvious. SCP-096 is a humanoid figure that can neither be killed nor contained when on the attack. However, it is almost always docile, only becoming aggressive when someone sees its face, returning to a state of rest once it has killed its witness, as well as anything in its path. In one incident report, SCP-096 was sitting in its containment when it suddenly entered its attack state and broke out, blazing a trail of destruction across the country in pursuit of some unknown trigger. It ended its rampage at a remote cabin, having killed the occupant, before re-entering its dormant state. Upon searching the cabin, personnel discovered a photo on the wall depicting a mountain range. In the far distance, presenting as just 4 pixels, was SCP-096. As one of the interviewees puts it, "You know when the former SCP-096-1 went on his mountain trip? 1997. That's 15 years of that photo hanging there before he saw SCP-096. Since the brain doesn't need to be aware that it's viewing its face to trigger the reaction, there can be ticking time bombs hidden literally anywhere in the world. How many photos are out there containing SCP-096, just going unnoticed, waiting for a careful eye?" In essence, the scientific framing of an SCP entry allows writers the opportunity to creatively explore horror concepts without the limitations that would normally be imposed on them by the structure of a traditional narrative. From the reader's perspective, it allows for a unique opportunity, the satisfaction of having all the what-ifs that would normally be reserved for internet arguments actually answered by the work itself, with the expanded knowledge only leading to deeper and more captivating questions that you would never have time to ask while simply running for your life.